4 people, 10 days. A cabin about the size of 2 minivans. No shower, no bed, no door you can close, except the one over the toilet. They ate lukewarm macaroni out of a foil pouch and washed with wet wipes. And while they did that, they were farther from home than any human being has ever been. 250,000 miles. This is Artemis II, not the press release version, the version the crew actually lived. The last person to come back from the moon splashed down in December 1972. Then, nothing. 53 years of it. An entire generation was born, grew up, and had children of their own without a single human leaving Earth orbit. On April 1st, 2026, 4 people changed that. Reid Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, Jeremy Hansen. They were not going to land. Artemis II was a loop, out, around the far side, and home. The point was to find out whether the ship keeps people alive that far out. 10 days later, they were back. Here's what happened in between. The Space Launch System produces about 8.8 million pounds of thrust, roughly 15% more than the Saturn V that flew Apollo. For the crew, that translates into about 3 times their body weight pressing them into their seats. Breathing takes effort. Lifting an arm is close to impossible. The solid rocket boosters add something worse than force. Vibration, a deep, bone-level shaking that runs through the whole vehicle and does not stop for the first 2 minutes. Then, the boosters burn out and drop away. About 8 minutes in, the main engines shut down. The silence is instant. Arms float up off laps. Pencils drift out of pockets. Anything not tied down lifts gently off whatever it was resting on. Orion gives 4 adults around 330 cubic feet. NASA compares it to 2 minivans. It is about 60% more room than Apollo's command module offered. But Apollo carried 3 people. And this carries 4, so the math stops feeling generous quickly. Christina Koch said before launch that she was counting on weightlessness to make the space feel bigger. Once in orbit, the crew rebuilt the interior. Foot pans came off the seats, equipment folded away. Anything that could be stowed was stowed to open up floor that is not really floor anymore. The toilet sits under the deck near the main hatch in a space about the size of a coat closet. There is a curtain. That curtain matters more than it sounds like it should, because one of your crewmates is 6'2" and there is nowhere else to go. Food comes in pouches. There is a small warmer and a water dispenser for the freeze-dried meals, but the warmer has limited capacity, so most of it gets eaten at room temperature. Jeremy Hansen, the Canadian, packed maple products and salmon from home. Picture it properly. Lukewarm macaroni squeezed out of a foil bag while you chase floating crumbs before they clog an air filter. 100,000 miles from the nearest kitchen. There is no fridge, no oven, no table. Hygiene is wet wipes, liquid soap, and dry shampoo. Toothbrush, razor, hairbrush. You brush your teeth and either swallow the toothpaste or spit into a wipe. That is the whole system. There is no water recycling on this flight. Every drop they drank was loaded before launch. Sleep is 8 hours a day. Scheduled. All 4 at the same time, in bags tethered to the walls. The life support system never stops running. Fans moving oxygen, scrubbing carbon dioxide, holding the temperature. It is not quiet in there. It is a machine keeping 4 people alive. And it sounds like one. Exercise is 30 minutes a day on a flywheel, a cable resistance device about the size of a carry-on suitcase, mounted below the side hatch. It also doubles as the step they use to climb in on launch day. For 10 days, that is enough to slow the muscle and bone loss that starts almost immediately in weightlessness. For anything longer, it would not be. 4 days out, the moon starts filling the windows. On April 6th, they passed behind it. Radio contact ended for about 40 minutes, because the moon is a rock 2,000 miles across and radio travels in straight lines. During that blackout, they reached the farthest point any human has ever traveled from Earth, 252,760 miles. The old record belonged to Apollo 13, set by a crew fighting to survive. This one was set on purpose, and nobody on the ground could confirm it while it happened. From there, Earth is small enough to cover with an outstretched thumb. Every person who has ever lived behind a fingertip. The far side itself does not look like the moon, you know. The face we see from Earth is roughly a third dark plains. Old lava flows, flat and smooth. The far side has almost none of that. Crust on that hemisphere is measurably thicker, thick enough that molten rock beneath it mostly never reach the surface. What you get instead is craters, over more craters, with nothing smooth to interrupt them. The crew photographed it. Not for the view, for Artemis III, which is meant to land. Now the thing that hung over this entire mission. In 2022, Artemis I flew the same spacecraft design without a crew. It came home, splashed down, and looked fine. Then engineers inspected the heat shield. They found more than 100 places where the protective material had cracked and broken away in chunks. Not the smooth, controlled burn-off it was designed for. Jagged, unpredictable loss. The investigation took nearly 2 years. The cause turned out to be trapped gas. During reentry, the material produces gases as it burns. On Artemis I, those gases could not escape fast enough. Pressure built inside the shield and blew pieces off. The trigger was the flight path. Artemis I used a skip re-entry. Dip into the atmosphere, bounce back out, come in again. That pause let heat soak into the material without letting it burn away properly. So NASA had a choice: redesign the heat shield or change the flight path. They kept the material. They changed the path. Artemis II came in steeper and straighter. One continuous descent, no skip. Less time in the temperature range that caused the cracking. The trade-off went to the crew. A steeper entry means harder deceleration, more force on 4 bodies during the worst minutes of the flight. Not everyone agreed. Charles Camarda, a former astronaut who flew on the shuttle's return-to-flight mission, called the decision to fly that heat shield a very bad decision. 4 people got in anyway. They had seen the photographs. They had sat in the briefings. On April 10th, Orion hit the atmosphere at close to 35 times the speed of sound. The air in front of the capsule compressed into a sheath of plasma around 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, roughly half the temperature of the sun's surface. A few inches of resin-soaked material stood between that and the crew. Inside, the forces built. A tug, then a push, then real weight. The windows glowed orange, then white. Radio cut out again for about 16 minutes as the ionized gas blocked the signal. Then parachutes. Then the Pacific, off San Diego. The capsule came down 2.9 miles from the target. Entry speed was within 1 mile per hour of the prediction. Navy divers reached it within minutes and photographed the heat shield in the water. The char loss was there. It was also dramatically smaller than on Artemis I, in both the number of spots and their size. NASA's initial assessment found the system performed as expected, with nothing unusual. The fix worked. The shield is still going to Marshall Space Flight Center for X-ray scans and sample extraction, because looking at something from a boat is not the same as understanding it. But the 4 people it was protecting climbed out in good health. 694,481 miles. 10 days without a shower, sleeping strapped to a wall, eating cold pasta from a bag, 30 minutes a day on a machine the size of a suitcase. That is what going to the moon actually looks like from the inside. Not the montage, the pouches and the curtain and the noise of the fans. They did it in a capsule the size of 2 family cars, trusting a heat shield that failed the last time it flew. And it held.